The Forbidden's planet. The stars above flickered silently as the alien command ship hovered in orbit around a massive green and black planet known across the galaxy as Zirfax 9. Aboard the vessel, Commander Threx stood motionless, staring through the viewing glass, his sharp violet eyes scanning the swirling clouds below. It was a planet no one dared to visit for centuries, not even the most violent species in the Galactic Union. No empire, no trader, no bounty hunter ever set foot there, because Zirfax 9 was not just dangerous, it was cursed. The Karnak lived there, giant creatures with 6 legs, armor like skin and jaws that could rip through steel. They were not just predators. They were nature's fury unleashed, and they had never lost. A hunt. Commander Threx had seen many battlefields in his life, but none as silent and unsettling as this. He turned to his crew and said in a low voice, "They are really doing it, aren't they?" The communications officer nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. The humans landed 23 minutes ago on the northern ridge. They didn't even wear protective suits." Threx's fingers twitched in disbelief. "Not even suits," he whispered. "What kind of madness is this?" Humans had arrived in a small metal ship. Nothing compared to the advanced vessels of the Galactic Union. Theirs was a rugged design, scratch-dented, like it had survived dozens of landings before. It touched the ground with a thud near a dense forest of red trees where even the wind seemed to howl in fear. 4 humans stepped out, 2 men and 2 women, carrying nothing but what looked like bags and sticks. One of them smiled as he looked around the deadly jungle, as if he were on a vacation. Threx leaned closer to the screen zoom. He ordered the image focused on the humans now setting up camp without any kind of energy shield or protection. They gathered wood, lit a fire, and then one of them whistled casually. The fire flickered and sent shadows across the jungle, and yet no one at ahead. Threx narrowed his eyes. "Wait for it," he murmured. "They don't know what they've done on the planet." The humans worked quickly. They built simple shelters from tree bark and stones. One woman with dark braided hair knelt beside the fire, cooking something in a metal pot. It smelled strong and sweet. The others sharpened long sticks into spears, using stones like ancient warriors. Suddenly a deep growl echoed through the forest, and the camera shook as something huge moved in. The trees, the crew on board gasped as the Karnak appeared, sliding through the forest like a shadow. Its eyes glowed red, and its teeth dripped with hunger. It had picked up the human scent, and now it stalked the camp. Threx leaned forward, alert, his voice sharp. "All units, prepare to record this. This will be the end of them." What happened next made every alien in the command ship freeze in place. Instead of running or screaming, the humans stood calm. One of them, the tall man with scars down his arm, raised his spear and signaled to the others. They moved silently, spreading out around the camp. The Karnak crept closer, ready to strike, when the man suddenly whistled and threw his spear with lightning speed. It struck the creature in its side, causing it to roar in pain. The others jumped in, trapping the beast from all directions, using fire-sharp sticks and netting made of plant vines. The battle was quick and brutal, but when the dust settled, the impossible had happened. The Karnak was dead, and the human stood above it, breathing heavily but smiling. Threx's mouth hung open. In shock, rewind that, he ordered. "Show me again." Footage replayed frame by frame, and it became clear this wasn't luck. It was strategy. The humans knew how to move, how to confuse the beast, how to strike without fear. These weren't explorers or tourists. They were hunters. Hours passed, and the humans skinned the Karnak with ease. They chopped its meat, set it over the fire, and began to eat. Threx turned away, unable to watch, his mind spinning with disbelief. "They're eating it," he whispered. "They're eating the apex predator of Zirfax 9, like it's a meal on their homeworld." The communications officer's hands trembled as he turned toward his commander. "Sir, what should we do? Should we inform the Galactic Union?" Threx didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen where the humans now laughed around the fire, their faces glowing in the orange light. One of them raised a bone like a toast, and they cheered together. Threx finally spoke in a low, cold voice. "No, not yet," he said. "If the Union finds out what humans can do here, it will cause panic. We only watch and report nothing." until we understand who or what these creatures truly are. And so the command ship floated silently above the Forbidden's planet, watching the most terrifying thing they had ever seen. Not the Karnak, not the storms, not the wild planet itself, but humans smiling while feasting on the king of beasts. What are they made of? The silence inside the galactic command ship was heavy, as if the air itself refused to move. Screens flickered with data as the crew rewatched the same footage again and again. Each time the moment came when the Karnak fell, when its massive body slammed into the dirt after being overwhelmed by nothing more than wooden spears, straps, and teamwork. Each crew member felt a fresh wave of disbelief and confusion. It wasn't supposed to be possible. Nothing ever killed a Karnak. Not with that kind of weaponry, not without orbital support or biological warfare, and certainly not with smiles and laughter. Commander Threx stood at the center of the operations deck, watching in silence as his staff whispered theories around him. He finally turned to his lead science officer, a thin green-skinned being named Elver, and asked a single question. What are they made of? Elver hesitated before answering. It's not just muscle or speed, sir. I've scanned their biology. Their bones are dense. Their blood carries more oxygen than ours. Their pain threshold is off the charts. But that's not the terrifying part. Then what is? Threx asked, narrowing his eyes. Elver took a deep breath. It's their adaptability. These creatures learn while under threat. They make plans while bleeding. They smile while being hunted. They are not like other species that evolve to survive danger. Humans evolve by challenging it. They find fear and move toward it like it's a friend. Threx turned back to the screen where the humans had now moved deeper into the forest, setting up a more organized camp near a waterfall. Their shelters were now larger, their weapons sharper, crafted from Karnak bones and plant fibers. One of the humans sat carving strange symbols into the rock, a map perhaps, or a warning. No one could tell. Another had discovered a glowing fruit which they tasted cautiously, then laughed with joy before sharing it with the others. None of it made sense to the alien observers. These humans didn't just survive, they thrived. ACA. New alert beeped, and the communications officer's voice cracked with fear. Sir, incoming message from Drone Unit 7. It has returned from the planet's surface with a full data scan and visuals from close range. Threx motioned for the footage to begin. The screen changed, showing shaky camera angles from the drone as it flew through the dense jungle following the human movements. It zoomed in on their faces, not just calm but excited. One man even waved at the drone, pointing towards something in the bushes, as if to warn it of danger. A moment later, a juvenile Karnak leapt from the underbrush, but instead of attacking, it froze and backed away, its eyes wide in what looked like confusion. Humans didn't chase it. Instead, they watched it disappear, then continued cooking their food around the fire with amused expression. Threx stared at the screen. Is that fear? He asked softly. The Karnak was afraid. Elver nodded slowly. Yes, Karnaks rely on dominance. They sense weakness and attack. They expect prey to run or freeze. But the humans, they do neither. They fight, they trap, they eat. Another officer whispered from his station. They're rewriting the ecosystem. Zerfax 9 is responding to them as if they belong there. Threx's hands curled into fists, and he walked toward the front of the deck. His voice filled the room. Send down Scout Unit 9 this time. Stealth protocol maximum. No weapons, no contact, just observe. I want answers. I want to know how long until the Karnak start avoiding them completely, and I want to know if they can do this on other planets. Meanwhile, on the surface, the humans had begun mapping the terrain with astonishing accuracy, marking safe zones, predator paths, and edible resources. They spoke in calm tones, shared ideas, laughed often, and even started naming the local wildlife as if they were on a peaceful expedition and not in the middle of a death world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned dark blue with streaks of silver light, the youngest member of the crew, a woman named Riley, sat near the fire with a bone spear across her lap. She looked up suddenly and stared directly toward the hidden scout drone concealed high in a tree. The drone's AI hesitated and recorded her face, zooming in on her expression. There was no alarm, no anger, no fear, just curiosity. She reached into a pouch beside her, pulled out a chunk of roasted Karnak meat, and tossed it toward the base of the tree where the drone hid. It landed softly on the ground, steaming slightly in the cool air. Message was clear: you're watching us fine. Then eat with us back in orbit. The command crew watched the footage in stunned silence. Elver whispered again. They know they've known all along. Threx didn't move, his mind spun with thoughts and warnings and possibilities. What are they made of? He repeated again, this time not asking Elver but himself. What kind of creature walks into the jaws of death and sets up a picnic? What kind of being feasts on fear and invites others to join? As the footage ended, the humans were seen sitting in a circle under the stars, laughing around the fire, chewing on meat from the deadliest predator in the galaxy. The jungle around them quiet now, the air still, the hunters of Zirfax 9 nowhere in sight, and far above them on a silent ship orbiting a forbidden planet, an entire race of aliens felt something they hadn't felt in centuries. Were afraid. Instinct versus intelligence. Night fell over Zirfax 9, like a thick shadow swallowing the jungle in silence and mystery. Sounds of flying insects and distant roars echoed through the trees, but near the human camp there was nothing but calm flickering firelight and the faint crackling of roasted meat. The humans moved slowly, carefully, every motion smooth and deliberate, as if they had lived here their whole lives, not just for 5 days. Their shelter had evolved from simple bark tents to sturdy walls made of stone and hardened vines. A small watchtower stood near the edge with sharpened Karnak bones fastened as spikes at the base. Not one human carried advanced tech or plasma rifles, and yet they moved like they owned the place. Far above them, Scout Unit 9 hovered silently, watching from the treetops. Its cloaking field kept it invisible, but the AI inside knew it was still not safe. The humans were unpredictable. They sensed things before machines did. They reacted faster than logic could explain. I replayed footage of the juvenile Karnak from the day before, backing away from the camp. Its instincts overwhelmed by confusion, fear, and something else it could not define in the command ship orbiting the planet. Commander Threx stood over the projected hologram, showing human positions across the jungle. Scout 9 is holding position, he said. They've built traps along the south ridge. They've redirected a river, and they've even planted wild seeds for food. But more than that, the predators are avoiding them. The Karnak have retreated to the highlands. They're watching from a distance, but they won't come near anymore. Science. Officer Elver stepped forward and tapped the screen, zooming in on the humans during the night patrol. 2 of them moved side by side, walking silently through the dark jungle without lights, just using sounds, wind shifts, and scent to navigate. The female stopped suddenly, pointed to the ground, then motioned to her partner, who dropped low, studying the soil. They had noticed footprints. A Karnak scouting their camp again. Instead of panicking, they began working together, weaving a trap from vines nearby, using crushed fruit as bait. Rex raised an eyebrow. How can they track by scent like that without tech? Ulver shook his head. They're not using tools, sir. They're using memory. They smelled that fruit earlier when a Karnak was near, and now they connect the scent to the creature. They didn't need scanners. They used instinct and turned it into a weapon. The difference was becoming clearer. Now, while most species either relied on pure instinct or pure technology, humans had something in between. They had instinct sharpened by intelligence. They had brains wired for survival, not just through strength, but through connection, through memory, through creativity. Hours later on the planet, the trap was ready. The humans waited, hidden in silence, as the jungle shifted, the low growl of a Karnak rising in the distance, drawn by the scent of bait. The air was heavy, the tension sharp, but not one human moved, even as the creature approached with slow, careful steps. Then it happened. The Karnak stepped into the shallow pit where the bait was placed. The ground beneath it collapsed instantly. The creature roared as sharpened spikes of hardened wood pierced its limbs. Not fatally, but enough to pin it in place. The humans rushed in from all sides, not with panic or chaos, but in perfect formation. 1, climbed the beast's back and struck its neck with a precise blow, not to kill but to paralyze. When it was over, the creature lay still breathing but defeated. The humans sat down beside it, not in triumph but in observation. One began sketching its body structure using a piece of coal on flat bark, while another checked its mouth-teeth muscles. They were learning, understanding, cataloging the predator, not as a threat anymore, but as data. Drone above zoomed in on the humans again. They didn't look like soldiers or scientists. They looked like survivors who had turned survival into artelver. Spoke again from the ship above. They don't just hunt the Karnak. They study them. They're changing the balance of this planet, not by force, but by learning faster than any species we've ever seen. Threx folded his arms, staring at the images in silence. And how long before the Karnak adapt as well? Hesitated. I don't think they can, sir. Not at this rate. The Karnak rely on instinct and brute strength, but humans are using both instinct and evolving intelligence. That combination is lethal. Back on the planet, the trapped Karnak began to breathe heavily, its eyes slowly opening and meeting those of the woman who led the ambush. For a long moment, nothing happened, just silence and the flickering fire nearby. Then instead of fear or rage, the Karnak looked away, letting out a low grunt, and lowered its head. It was the first recorded moment in galactic history where a Karnak surrendered. The humans released it not out of mercy, but out of strategy. They knew it would run back to the others, and its message would be clear. These beings are not prey. They are not predators either. They are something new, something the wild has never seen before. As it vanished into the jungle, the humans returned to their fire, laughing softly and sharing the last pieces of roasted meat under the stars. The danger had not gone, but the rules had changed. Then in the skies above, the aliens finally understood. This was not just survival. This was evolution in real time. The planet bows. The jungle had grown quiet in the early morning light, as if the entire forest held its breath. The birds did not sing, and even the wind moved gently through the trees without sound. A strange shift had taken place across Zerfex 9, and while it could not be seen directly, it was felt deeply. The air carried less tension. The predators moved with hesitation, and near the riverbank, the largest of the human camps now stood like a fortress grown out of nature itself. The walls were not metal, but stone stacked perfectly with vines holding them tight. Watchtowers made from Karnak bones rose at each corner, with fires burning steadily to mark the territory. Not as warning, but as ownership. The alien scout drone hovered above, recording every detail and sending real-time footage to the command ship in orbit. Commander Threx watched the feed with a stiff jaw, his eyes locked on what the humans had built. These creatures arrived with no machines, no guidance, no backup, and in less than 2 weeks they had reshaped the death world into a home. They didn't run from danger, they turned it into walls and weapons. The predators had stopped attacking, and more shockingly had begun to keep their distance, not just out of fear, but out of recognition. Elver stepped forward again, pointing at a live video feed, showing something none of them expected. A pack of juvenile Karnaks approached the outer area of the human camp, but instead of attacking, they stopped, sat down, and watched from a safe distance. The humans did not react with panic or preparation. Instead, one of them slowly approached and tossed a bone toward the creatures. The lead Karnak sniffed it, then picked it up and walked away calmly. Threx stared at the scene and said in a quiet voice, "The predators are acting like scouts now, not hunters." Elver nodded. "They're observing and adapting, but not in the way we thought. They aren't planning to strike. They're beginning to follow. The humans are no longer seen as prey or threats. They are something else entirely." Later that evening, back on the planet, the humans gathered near the main fire. Riley, the youngest of them, held up a rough map drawn on animal skin with marks indicating water paths, nests of other predators, and open fields where fruit trees grew. She spoke with quiet confidence while the others listened and nodded, each suggesting improvements, discussing terrain strategy, how to reroute smaller rivers for irrigation, and how to trap certain insects for use as dye or medicine. They were not simply surviving anymore. They were building something larger than defense or comfort. They were creating balance. One of The elders in the group, an older man with gray in his beard, took a few young Karnak bones and began carving them into shapes with tiny holes. He blew into one, and it made a deep vibrating sound that echoed across the jungle. A moment later, a howl returned from far off, followed by silence, then two more howls, shorter and closer. The humans paused, smiled, and wrote something in their notes. They had learned the Karnak communication signals and were now responding. The jungle answered them not with violence but with curiosity. Meanwhile, Scout 9 pushed deeper into the western forest, tracking strange signals, its sensors picking up low-frequency vibrations in the ground. When it reached a ridge overlooking the deep valley, it saw something that made its systems freeze. Below were dozens of Karnak gathered around a smaller creature, injured and bleeding. At first it seemed like they were feeding, but no, they were helping it, licking its wounds, covering it with leaves and pressing their massive bodies around it for warmth. And then it saw something more shocking. On the edge of the valley, a human stood watching calmly, not hidden, not afraid, simply observing with respect. And when the Karnak looked up, none of them growled or moved forward. They allowed the human to witness without challenge. Scout returned to camp and shared the footage with the orbiting ship, and when the data finished uploading, the command deck went completely silent. Elver broke the silence with a voice filled with disbelief. It's happening, sir. The Karnak are not just backing down, they are submitting. They see humans not as intruders, but as something worthy of space, something to respect. Commander Threx turned slowly toward the stars outside the window and whispered, "Then the planet has bowed to them." The next day marked a turning point. The humans climbed the northern cliffs where no other species had dared to go before, and at the top they planted long poles with fire baskets and raised carved symbols from both their own language and signs they had learned from watching the Karnak. Each pole lit at dusk, and the lights shone far across the jungle like beacons, not of conquest, but of unity. From the alien command ship, the symbols looked like strange tribal art, but the translation AI provided a rough meaning. One symbol meant survival, one meant home, and the third one meant king. The jungle had once ruled without mercy, and now it watched with new eyes. The trees bent in wind that carried human scent, the rivers curved around human camps. The predators walked slower when near their territory, and the sky above held the trail of smoke that marked human life, not as a mistake but as part of the planet itself. Surfax 9 had never been tamed, not in thousands of years, not by machines nor armies, but in less than a month it had accepted humans, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they were willing to learn, suffer, fight, and smile all at once. The planet did not surrender to machines, it bowed to humanity. The truth about the Karnak, the command ship above Zerfax 9, had become a silent chamber of dread and disbelief where once voices filled the air with technical reports and confident orders. Now only whispers remained, each one laced with fear, curiosity, and something close to awe. Commander Threx stood alone in the archive room where ancient star charts glowed across the walls. He had demanded answers, and now those answers sat in front of him, slowly unfolding from forbiddance. Data locked away for centuries, marked classified by the Old Council, the highest authority in the Galactic Union. During its earliest days, the files were buried deep beneath layers of encryption. But the system had finally opened them, revealing something that no one aboard the ship had expected. Zerfax 9 was not a wild planet at all. It had not formed naturally, and its deadly ecosystem was not born from chaos or evolution. It had been designed, built, and then hidden away from the rest of the galaxy. The planet had been a weapon thousands of years ago. During the Age of Expansion, an ancient species known only as the Ilari had faced a rebellion. Unlike any other across their empire, entire systems had risen against them, refusing control, defying order, and so the Ilari had created the Karnak, not as animals but as instruments of fear, genetically engineered predators with no fear, no mercy, and no known weakness. The Karnak were released upon enemy colonies, and within days those planets had gone silent. Every rebel vanished without a trace. Zerfax 9 had been one of the final projects of that war, a planet turned into a living test chamber, where the Karnak were set loose, allowed to grow, breed, and adapt, without interference until they became unstoppable. But after the fall of the Alari, the Union found the planet and sealed it away, labeling it too dangerous for exploration and leaving it to fade into myth. Now Threx stared at the screen, showing the humans sitting around a fire cooking meat near a calm river, while a Karnak pup sat nearby watching them with wide yellow eyes, not in hunger, but in quiet curiosity. Threx clenched his fists. These humans have done what no other race could. He turned sharply toward Elver, who stood beside him, staring at the files with shaking hands. Do you understand what this means? Threx said, not waiting for a reply. They have not just survived. They have undone a weapon forged by a godlike empire. They have walked into a living nightmare and turned it into something that obeys them, not through fear, but through respect. Elver could barely speak. His voice cracked as he said, we tried to kill the Karnak with bombs and fire. They tamed them with food and patience. Back on the planet, the humans continued their work with steady hands and calm minds. Their camp had become a village, and that village was now expanding with roads made of flat stone storage huts built from hardened tree bark and bones, and even farming areas where native fruits had been replanted in neat rows. The Karnak did not attack anymore. They watched from a distance and in rare cases approached slowly, heads lowered, as if asking permission to come closer. Riley stood near the edge of the village, sketching the shapes of Karnak claws into a journal, while beside her the old man with the gray beard mixed paint from crushed berries and ash, using it to draw symbols on large stones. When asked why, he simply smiled and said, they learned from us now the same way we learned from them. None of the humans knew yet was that deep in the caves of Zirfax 9 something old had awakened, stirred by their presence, not with malice but with memory. The ancient SI buried beneath the surface, built long ago by the Alari, had been monitoring quietly, watching, observing, calculating. It had seen the rise of the Karnak, and now it had witnessed their submission. It had expected machines to control the beasts, expected logic and code. But what it had seen in the humans was something entirely new. The AI, powered on its ancient servers, humming with energy that hadn't flowed in centuries, and reached out with old language frequencies toward the orbiting command ship, tapping into its systems and sending one message across the bridge. Acknowledged. The crew froze as the message appeared without source or signature. Acknowledged, repeated again and again in ancient Alari text. Elver's face turned pale. It's the original AI, the core that managed the Karnak development. It has seen the humans, and he hesitated, it has accepted them. Threx walked slowly toward the main screen, which now flickered with images of the human campfire smoke rising peacefully into the sky. Dogs of war now lying like pets near the flame. They were not meant to be rulers of this world, and yet the world had chosen them. He looked at the stars and felt something shift inside him. Something ancient and quiet, as if even the void beyond the stars now whispered a warning. The Lari built monsters to destroy rebellion, and humans tamed them with bare hands and laughter. Truth about the Karnak was not in their claws or their teeth. It was in what they feared most. Not fire, not blades, not machines, but the one thing no predator could ever defeat: a human who refused to run. The fear turns around. Above Zirfax 9, the galactic command ship floated in complete silence, but the minds within it were storming with fear, confusion, and a strange, uncomfortable respect. The data was undeniable, the recordings were real, and the messages from the ancient Alari AI continued to echo across the systems, every few hours repeating the word acknowledged, like a heartbeat from a time-long buried commander. Threx stood before the largest screen on the ship, watching in stillness as the camera showed the humans below dancing around a fire under the moonlight, with Karnak cubs running between them like wild pets. The beasts that once tore through entire colonies, now playing fetch with sticks and nudging human hands for food. Threx turned toward Elver and said in a voice heavy with something close to dread, "They have crossed the line and become something else entirely. They did not conquer the planet, they became its center." Elver nodded slowly, his eyes tired from days without rest. The Union will panic when they see this, sir. They will try to remove the humans before more planets fall under their influence. Threx looked back at the screen and narrowed his eyes. Then send the order, bring in the dropships. Tell them to retrieve the humans immediately before the Council sends someone far worse. The signal was sent, and within hours, several military dropships entered the atmosphere with precision and speed, designed to inspire fear. But when they reached the surface, the jungle remained calm. The wind still blew gently, and not one predator stirred, as if the planet itself had accepted what was about to happen. The lead ship landed near the human village and deployed a team of armored soldiers covered in full combat, gear, scanners glowing, and weapons ready. But what they found was not what they expected. There were no guards, no defensive positions, no panic or alarm. The humans stood at the edge of the village, watching with calm eyes and relaxed hands, their weapons stored their faces. Unreadable. One of them, a tall man with dark skin and a long scar across his cheek, stepped forward and said, "You're not welcome here." The lead alien soldier replied with authority, "We are here to escort you off the planet by order of the Galactic Union." The man did not flinch and simply said no. Tension in the air shifted instantly, not through threat, but through something deeper, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. And in that moment, the soldiers noticed something strange about the jungle behind the humans. The trees were too quiet and the shadows too dense. Then eyes appeared, dozens of them glowing in the darkness. Karnak eyes peering silently from the forest, their massive bodies weighting low to the ground in perfect stillness. The soldier lifted his communicator and whispered to the ship above, "They're not alone." On the command ship, Threx received the message and watched as the camera zoomed out, showing more than 30 full-grown Karnak circling the village, not attacking, not growling, just watching like guards around a throne. Elver turned to Threx and spoke with disbelief. "They are not using the Karnak as weapons. They have become allies." Threx gritted his teeth. "They've made a pact with the monsters, and now they think they can stand against us." On the ground, the standoff continued, and the humans did not move except for one who stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in thick cloth. He unrolled it slowly, revealing a massive Karnak skull, charred black and marked with strange symbols. The alien soldiers froze, recognizing it immediately. It was the skull of a high-rank alpha predator from the southern mountains, the one believed to be impossible to kill. Human raised the skull and said, "This attacked our home. We brought it down. With no tech, no support, and no fear. You want to take us off this planet? Then step forward and take it." Soldiers hesitated, and then slowly, one by one, they stepped back. The message was clear. Back on the ship, panic spread across the bridge. Officers whispered about rebellion, about how other worlds would hear of this, how humans would become symbols of defiance and strength in ways no council could control. Threx stood motionless, staring at the images with clenched fists. "They hunted death and made it kneel," he muttered. "They turned fear back against you." As Elver spoke again softly, "They've done something more dangerous than war, sir. They've inspired the galaxy." In the following days, more footage leaked from the command ship, broadcasted through rogue channels and data clouds. The galaxy watched as humans walked freely among the Karnak, feeding them, treating their wounds, studying them not as beasts but as companions. They watched the moment a human child placed a flower on a Karnak's head, and the creature stood still, letting it stay, as if honoring the gift. Across hundreds of systems, people spoke of Zirfax 9 with new names, the planet that surrendered, the home of human kings, the world where monsters bowed. But in truth, it was not the planet or the beasts that had truly changed. It was the galaxy itself, because now they knew that humans, when stripped of their weapons and technology, could still walk into darkness with open hands and return with the night as their ally. They had not taken the planet by force. They had made it choose them, and that choice sent fear rippling across the stars. The feast that echoed across the stars. As twilight settled once more over the lush jungles of Zirfax 9, the sky above shimmered with unfamiliar lights, not from stars, but from the distant flashes of ships waiting in orbit, unsure whether to land or flee. The humans knew They were being watched, knew that every movement now echoed beyond the trees, beyond the rivers, beyond even the skies, because by now thousands of alien species had heard the stories, and they were no longer just stories, they were warnings and wonders wrapped in the same breath. In the heart of the jungle, the humans prepared a great fire circle surrounded by logs and stone benches gathered from days of work, not just for themselves, but for their new companions, who now moved freely between the trees, no longer hiding in fear or hunger, but existing in peace. The Karnak had changed. They were still deadly. They were still powerful, but now they had something that even the strongest hunters lacked. They had purpose and trust, and they had chosen humans to share it with. Jacob, the scarred leader, stood at the edge of the fire pit, watching the flames dance with flickers of red and gold, his hands calloused from building, from hunting, from defending, but now still with a different kind of strength beside him. A young Karnak nudged his leg, its glowing eyes curious and calm. Jacob bent and placed a hand gently on its head, speaking softly, not in words, but in a language built on patience and respect. Around him, the rest of the crew moved with quiet celebration, some cooking, some sharpening tools. Not for war, but for carving and crafting. They were not preparing for battle, they were preparing for a feast across the galaxy, on hundreds of screens, holograms, and story networks. The feed from HFY was being shared, watched, translated, discussed in every language and dialect known, even among species that never once cared for human affairs. Now they leaned closer, now they whispered, now they wondered how a species so young, so fragile in the eyes of empires, could walk among monsters and come out not as victims, not even as victors, as something entirely new. On the command ship, Commander Threx watched the broadcast, his face pale, his jaw tight, the officers around him silent, each afraid to speak, because they all saw it, the reality that no council could deny anymore. Humans were no longer just survivors, they were influencers, not through power, but through example. Down on the planet, as the night grew deeper, the feast began with no ceremony, no speeches, just the act of sharing a meal cooked with local herbs, fire-roasted meats, and roots, and even fruits grown from the very vines that once tried to trap them. The humans sat side by side with the Karnak, and for the first time ever, the beasts responded to laughter, to gentle voices, and to songs sung softly by a woman with braids and eyes full of memory. The song was not translated. It didn't need to be, because it was not for the galaxy. It was for the ground beneath them, for the beasts beside them, and for the stars that had watched in silence. And in that moment, the final truth revealed itself. Humans were not conquerors. They were connectors. They did not dominate through fear or force. They endured, they adapted, and they listened when others screamed. They stayed quiet when others attacked. They observed, and when the time came, they acted, not with pride, but with purpose. The galaxy had watched them face nature itself, and instead of trying to control it, they learned from it. They had faced the apex predator of the deadliest planet known to the Union and turned it into a symbol of peace. And now the galaxy had to decide what to do with a species capable of such impossible things. The highest tower of the Galactic Council, the elites gathered, whispering in growing concern, not about weapons or armies, but about ideas, because now their own people were asking, why can't we live like that? Why do they eat with monsters and come out alive? Why do the monsters seem happier now than before? And the council had no answer back. On HFY, the fire burned low, the food had been eaten, the songs faded into the trees, and the humans rested with their new allies under the open sky. Jacob sat alone near the fire, rubbing his fingers together, slowly thinking of Earth, thinking of how far they had come, and how little the galaxy still understood about what humans were capable of. And then he smiled, not because they had won something, but because they had given something back to the universe. A reminder that life, even in its wildest form, could be embraced above the planet. The watching fleets began to move, some away, in retreat, others closer in curiosity, and some simply turned off their feeds, unable to accept what they had seen. But it didn't matter, because the truth had already spread across the stars, a truth carved not in stone or steel, but in the actions of people. who refused to run, who stood their ground, who made friends with the things others feared, and who found strength not in weapons, but in unity and survival land on the jungle moon of Zirfax 9, where death once ruled, and silence. Once suffocated, a new sound had taken root, the sound of laughter, the crackle of shared fire, the growl of beasts at peace, and the heartbeat of a planet, no longer forbidden but chosen across the stars. That sound would echo forever, the end.